Hey everyone, and thanks for jumping back into the cryptoverse. This is another edition of Not Financial Advice Live, or NFA Live. We have two guests with us as always. We have Rob from Digital Asset News. He's up in the top left. And then we also have Guy, who runs the very popular Coin Bureau channel down at the bottom of the screen down there. So we do this every single Friday. If you're not subscribed to these two guys, you'll find the links in the description below. Make sure you go sign up or you go subscribe to their pages. I'm going to go ahead and put this link out so that people know that we're live. But what we essentially do is we just go through questions every single week. We try to get various opinions that you might not otherwise say just because you're making your own videos. So that's the plan. How are you guys doing today?
Great. How you guys doing?
I'm doing pretty well. How about you? How about you, Guy?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. I'm well. I'm here in Dubai. It's a bit strange. We've suddenly had torrential rain here the last few days, so it's kind of weird. I'm feeling cold for the first time in a long time. So, but other than that, I'm good.
All right, good to hear. Well, we're going to go through 5 different questions, and at the end, we'll of course let the audience ask a few questions. The main things we're going to talk about are related to Bitcoin's current rally and how it seemingly has taken some control of the market back. With the dominance going somewhat higher, still pretty low at 44%, but it has seen a pretty impressive move from 40%. We also know that Genesis filed for bankruptcy protection recently, so we're going to talk about a little bit about that. I also want to dive in a little bit more into the 2 schools of thought that we see related to what drives Bitcoin's price. Is it more of a supply-based thing related to the halving, or is it more of a demand-based thing that's going to be dependent on loose monetary conditions? I also want to talk a little bit about the Fed and what do you see the Fed doing? Because there still remains some disagreements with the Fed and the markets as to exactly what they're going to do. So curious to get your opinion on that. And then the last thing is, we've seen plenty of apathy this year, or at least over the last 6 months. I think a lot of people have become apathetic. So I'm curious to know, what keeps you motivated during during this phase of the market. Because we can see that the social statistics are still somewhat low. And then what do you think will actually bring that social interest back to the cryptoverse? Do you think it's just halving, or could it be something else? So we got a lot to talk about today. And Rob, I'll start with you first, Rob. And so the question is, Bitcoin has taken control of the market. And we've talked about, the idea of getting these like Bitcoin only type rallies. I mean, there's obviously other stuff rallying, but Bitcoin has taken some control. My question is, do you think this is fueled mostly, do you think it's fueled mostly by stable coins going back into Bitcoin? Is it fueled by the altcoin market bleeding back to Bitcoin? Is it both? And how long do you think this phase is going to last? Is it already over, or is it going to last a few more weeks or a few more months? What are your thoughts about the current sort of change in the market conditions?
Yeah, the change in it's. I got to tell you, honestly, it's caught me by surprise. I didn't think. First of all, I didn't think we'd rally as high as we did, and the second one, I did not expect it to continue on with what it has. So. We can talk about that. Maybe it's people moving things from their from stable coins into Bitcoin, but I don't know if that's essentially what it is. I think when people take a look at the on-chain metrics, and me personally, when I saw that, we've had a rash of collapses, right? We have had everything from Celsius, Voyager, FTX, BlockFi, Genesis, and everything going on. It was amazing how many people were resilient, just didn't sell, and just say, you know what, I don't really care. And then we can take a look at just data that takes a look at, for people who have Bitcoin for over a year, it's like 67, 70%. And they just keep going on. So for me, I just think it's people who are just so battle tested. Like if you're watching this video, you right now, you're pretty much don't care. You're like, I don't care that this is going on in the background. I'm just going to sit it out, and I'm going to just stay here for the long haul. And I think that's what our market needs. But I will say that it is interesting just to take a look at like how things have played out. Because I know, like, Ben, you're a big, Bitcoin dominance and things that are going up. I mean, if we take a look at like the top 10 from like 1 month, 3 months, and 6 months, I mean, Bitcoin's like over a month is up 36%. 3 months, 10%, 6 months negative, it's down -4%. And that's pretty much the best one out of pretty much all of them. I mean, ETH is down -2%, 3 and 6, BNB -1. Well, actually, BNB is actually doing pretty good. And then like Dogecoin and ADA and all those ones. ADA is down -30 and -9%, but plus 43% over a month. So for me, I just think it's people just holding on and going, well, I mean, what's the alternative? So that's how I see things.
Do you think, or I guess the sort of the follow-up was, is it going to last a while, or do you think that phase is over soon?
I mean, it's going to kind of get into the next questions that we're going to talk about contagion. It really comes down to what's happening in the market and the macro events.
Right.
And like, we'll get into what the Fed talks about. I think it can keep going because the things that will stifle it are the things that are happening behind the scenes, whether that be contagion or a macro event, or we see things. But I mean, in all honesty, take a look at, the stock market is even rallying. Tesla's even rallying after their earnings report came out. Right. So, I mean, how long could it last? I don't know. But I think there's some problems on the horizon, but who knows if those are going to come out. So I think for a while, sure. I don't see why it would take a big dump off anytime within the next, week or so.
Yeah, I think this is like Tesla's fourth 50% rally over the last year and a half or something. Guy, what are your thoughts? I mean, is this a sort of like are we at the beginning phases, you think, of this shift in, like this idea that Bitcoin's outperforming for a little while, or do you think that phase is coming to an end and altcoins will sort of take back some of that relative performance? What are your thoughts?
I kind of see Bitcoin sustaining this for a while, I think. And I think my main reasoning behind that is just Bitcoin being, I guess, the safe haven asset in crypto. If you leave aside stable coins for the time being, I think Bitcoin has got that huge kind of institutional interest. It's obviously got that particular benefit of being the only crypto that's supposedly safe from the SEC. And I think for me, that seems to be the big risk on my horizon, I think, for altcoins in particular, is just what happens, what plays out in the US with the SEC and future enforcement actions, because I think that is the big risk to altcoins at the moment. And I think as long as that cloud is kind of hanging over the altcoin market. And I mean, let's face it, we're unlikely to get any sort of resolution. June has been put forward as the date for, as the next date for resolution in this XRP case. Whether it will be June, I don't know. It could be a lot later than that. But June is the next date. So I think until then, and that would assume that the SEC doesn't win the case. I think until then, we've got this uncertainty over altcoins, and I think that will help fuel Bitcoin dominance until then. And I think there's a very good chance that the SEC does win that case. It's dragged on for so long now. So I think there is this huge risk hanging over the altcoin market. And I think that is going to be to Bitcoin's benefit, certainly over the short to medium term. And who knows what the outcome of this is going to be. I think it was really worrying to see, I think it was towards the end of last week, when the SEC filed its charges against the Mango Markets hacker. And they said in that document and in the accompanying press release that they considered the Mango token. Bear in mind, this is a DeFi governance token. They outright referred to that as a security, and that has just kind of, for me, it's kind of stirred up the sediment at the bottom of that pond. That kind of gave me the jitters a bit. So. Yeah, I think for that and that reason alone, I can see this Bitcoin dominance. I can see Bitcoin benefiting from this for a while now, for a while yet, I should say.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like it's been a long time coming too. I mean, like I think I front ran dominance surge a little bit, but I am happy to see it because it's kind of a reflection that the market's getting back to a more normal state, in my opinion. So yeah, hopefully we'll see the dominance continue going higher over the next few months, and that's usually a good thing for the altcoin market because then it means the dominance can then dump eventually again, and then the altcoin market can.
Yeah. Hey Ben, before we move on, I want to ask the both of you, what if the SEC wins the case against XRP and they say, okay, that's a security, and that sets precedent for others, and now we see that all these things that they said were a security, whether they be or not, what do you think is going to happen in the market at that point? Do you think it'll just be like a little bit of blip, or do you think that it'll be pretty much chaos for quite some time for altcoins? And is that good or bad?
Well, I mean, I would suspect that if they are going to be declared securities, I think there's a good chance you might see the market, I don't know, somehow find out about it beforehand and bleed into that, you know? And I don't think it would be a little blip. I think what would likely occur is that it would probably kill off a lot of the useless altcoins. But the ones that are actually valuable and you know are worthwhile could probably survive. Again, you know, we've talked about securities in and of themselves. I mean, look, we have an entire stock market. We have securities, right? And the stock market rallies all the time and puts in new all-time highs all the time. So I do think it's possible. It would take away the environment that we're currently in, though. Like we would no longer have like the wild west of crypto, right? It would be much different. But you know, the one thing I go back and forth on is this idea of regulation, because you know I would have assumed we would have already had regulation by now, to be completely honest. So I do wonder if it's something they're just gonna, and maybe I don't know, maybe with the SEC they'll come to a decision, but with with XRP, but I mean this thing could drag out for years for all we know, or at least like real clarity as to what's going on. Because one potential outcome with the SEC is sort of like somewhere in between, where it's like they might provide a response that is not exactly in either one's complete favor, but sort of like a nuanced view. That's kind of my opinion.
Yeah. And Guy, since you're in the thick of it, doing all those great videos, what do you think?
I think we'd see a period of sort of a short period of chaos. This is assuming the SEC wins. I think, Ben, you make a good point there. It's not something that I'd really considered, the fact that perhaps it'll turn out to be neither one thing nor the other. Perhaps there is a middle ground that the judge in the case can tread. I'm no legal expert, so I don't know what that could be or whether that's really possible in this situation. But I think we'd certainly see some kind of short-term chaos as the market reacts to it. But I mean, bear in mind, I think the SEC, people would expect perhaps the SEC to then just start, you know, emptying the clip on, you know, any project that it can get close to. But of course, it will have learned its lesson with Ripple. I think, you know, this is. Does it want to then tie itself up in dozens of lawsuits against this cryptocurrency project or that cryptocurrency project? I don't think so. I think perhaps it could be that we do get some sort of clarity out of it. But I think short term it would be a bloodbath. But I think perhaps longer term maybe it would be for the best. But yeah, certainly it would be an ugly few days.
I think there's a lot of people out there going, I hope it does, because they would pick it all up for some cheap prices. Okay, sorry to hijack that.
No, it's fine.
That
was
a good question.
And to give you an example of a potential nuanced view, which I'm not a legal expert. I don't know the likelihood of it actually occurring, but a potential example of a nuanced view could be that like when it launched, it was a security, but like now it's not, right? So like it could be something like that where it's somewhere in between, and therefore it could really make it difficult for new projects to get off the ground. But again, like I don't know. I really don't know what way they're going to go. And you know, when I looked at the cryptoverse side of things, it seems like everyone in crypto is fairly optimistic. But when you look outside of the crypto bubble, no pun intended, right? It's you know, people are a lot more skeptical. You know, so I don't know.
Sure.
We'll see. I mean, I think Bitcoin is going to remain by far the safest play until we at least get past that. That bump.
Yeah, I'll just remind everybody that this happened to EOS. They were deemed a security. They were fined by the SEC and they moved on. And
right.
They seem to Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, of course,
Not
now
that's
that
true.
now they've
And
sort of like, you don't even hear about them anymore. But
yeah.
um,
But of course, what does the SEC actually want? I mean, maybe the SEC just wants Ripple to pay an enormous fine
right.
and move on. Maybe I think that the perception can be that the SEC wants to destroy Ripple and XRP. Is that necessarily the case? Perhaps not. I mean, Ripple's a US-based company. Perhaps they just want to make an example, collect an enormous fine, and use that precedent to to bring other projects into line.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and they're also walking a fine line, I think, between between actually having innovation in crypto state in the States versus sending it offshores into other places. So hopefully whatever they do, they get it right, and it's not too bad for crypto in the US. Let's move on to the next question. I think it was a good question, Rob. So thanks for asking that. Guy, we're going to start with you on this next one. So, the recently we had Genesis declare bankruptcy. I don't really think it came as a surprise to anyone. I mean, it's sort of like one of those things that everyone could see from a mile away. And I mean, Bitcoin and the cryptoverse as a whole is largely shrugged it off here in the short term, at least. It doesn't really seem like the cryptoverse cares that much. A lot of these things get priced in way in advance than the events actually occurring. And so, when we think about like what is the primary risk to crypto, could this contagion stuff that people have talked about for a long time and whatnot, has that mostly run its course, do you think? Or is there a path that could lead to further repricing if some other larger ones were to fall that we just aren't really thinking about right now? Because I mean, again, it declared bankruptcy, and it really, the cryptoverse does not really seem to care that much right now.
Yeah, it's odd, isn't it? I've been surprised over the last few weeks to notice that, and sort of looking around and going, is nobody seeing that this huge company and this even bigger company that owns this big company are both in a heck of a lot of trouble? Why is no one paying attention to this? But yeah, I think it's been priced in. I think the Genesis bankruptcy has been priced in pretty much since the day they paused withdrawals, and I think crypto holders, the crypto industry is just so, I guess, battle hardened or jaded. Pick your adjective. But we've seen this before, haven't we? We've seen this enough times over the last year or so. Withdrawals are paused, and bankruptcy pretty much inevitably follows a few weeks, maybe months down the line. So yeah, I think this has been priced in by the market for quite some time. Is there further risk in the system? Can we see more to push prices lower? I mean, the main risk that I see is in this context is DCG. Is this going to spill over and pull DCG down with it? And obviously, we're seeing things like DCG does seem to be looking to sell assets. I mean, CoinDesk is up for sale. Doesn't seem like it's going to get the price that DCG want for it. And of course, we kind of have this idea of DCG's sort of whole balance sheet sort of being dangled over the market. And yet, as you say, Ben, it doesn't seem to care. My gut feeling is, and I'm completely prepared to be wrong on this, but my gut feeling is that, with the exception of DCG, I feel that perhaps the contagion is coming to an end, and maybe DCG is the last domino of all. I know that people are worried about other big companies in the space,
right?
But I mean, I think I know which ones most people are probably thinking of: Binance and Tether. But let's face it, Binance and Tether have held up. They've processed billions of dollars of withdrawals in recent months, ever since kind of FTX went down. So they seem to me, from what I can tell, they seem to be robust. So my feeling is that DCG is perhaps the last one. And of course, DCG could survive. If I recall, it's about $3 billion in debt, which is significant, but not perhaps, I mean, Genesis is what, $10 billion in debt. Whether, of course, DCG somehow has to pick up that tab as well remains to be seen. And of course, there are other things. I mean, I know a lot of people are kind of speculating. It's like, will Cameron Winklevoss sue? Which seems to me to be slightly pointless. I mean, the money's not there. What is suing going to do? But yeah, as I say, my gut feeling tells me that this is we're perhaps seeing the contagion come to an end now. At least I hope so.
Yeah, I mean, Rob, are you in agreement? Do you think this mostly run its course at this point and we're just sort of looking towards the future? Or do you think there's some other dominoes that need to fall?
So first of all, Guy was right, because when we were talking about maybe there's some points of disagreement here, and he said specifically number 2, and I was like, yeah, it's going to be. So like Guy, not to say that there is no way that this could or couldn't happen, but it just, all the things that have been going on, I'm just a little bit more and more reserved. So I hope that everything is priced in. I think it's all priced in. And we talk about how even the Fed rate hikes are priced in, but it seems like every time Jerome Powell comes in there and opens his mouth, the market gets a little bit shaky for some god-awful reason, even though he's been telegraphing it for the longest time. So for me, I just take a look at it, and I think, to me, I'm waiting for another shoe to fall. And that's why, I would like to go back to my old DCA of the regular amounts that I do, but it is because of these things. And there's this graph, and there's 60 some different companies of the contagion effects between Alameda, FTX US, and FTX Ventures. And there's all these different companies that are involved. Sam seems to still believe that FTX US is solvent, even though I don't know how that's possible, but he does. So I'm just being reserved, and I'm hoping that I'm wrong, but I just can't get back into the things that I do. Again, not financial advice as far as the normal amounts of dollar cost averaging. I'm just waiting for something to go wrong. Now, let's just say we get through this. Let's say that Genesis, because the lawyers came out and said, we think we can get out of Chapter 11 by May. Good luck. We'll see that happen. Celsius is, they said, I think the same thing when they began, and they're still going through the rigmarole. So if they can get out and we don't see anything in the next 3 to 6 months, then I'll feel a little bit more comfortable. And hopefully people will, hopefully I'm wrong. I want to be wrong on this one, but I just a little bit reserved so far.
There's always a chance too.
Do you think?
Go ahead. Sorry,
Ben. Do you think, Rob, do you think the markets are kind of pricing in the fact that, do you think the markets believe that any of these companies will find their way out of Chapter 11? I don't think. Does anyone really think that Celsius is going to be okay? Does anyone think that Genesis is going to be okay?
There's a small minority of people who think that Celsius is awesome and it's going to come back. And I think that those people are not looking at some of the facts. And who the people that I'm talking about. Again, I hope I'm wrong. I hope it does. But I'll never trust Celsius again to save my life. But when we take a look at, does anybody believe it? I think, again, that we're so battle-hardened that we're not a big deal. Again, I think let's say, for example, let's say Genesis files, or not Genesis, let's say Gemini files for Chapter 11. Would that change a lot of people's minds? I don't know if it really would, because they're it's another centralized exchange that goes down, and that's just because of the contagion. I don't know if it would be a big thing. I think the bigger thing would be the play, and Mark Yusko talked about this on Ben's channel, which would be if DCG starts to collapse and we see some problems with Grayscale Bitcoin Trust. I think that, and then maybe even Foundry. I think that would be the bigger one. But if we see another centralized exchange go down, I don't think it's going to be that big of a play. I'm just thinking of the big, and that's where I try to protect myself.
Well, I think about when FTX went down, Bitcoin, it only put in a new low by a couple $1,000s or so. So, Rob, there's always a chance that the dominoes haven't stopped falling, but it doesn't necessarily mean that event in and of itself has to lead to new lows in the price of Bitcoin.
Yeah, it would have to be, you're right. It would have to be something big.
Right.
Pretty astronomical. Again,
right. Yeah,
Gemini falls down. Coinbase, I don't know. I think if Binance fell down, then we'd have some problems, because that's the biggest exchange out there.
I think the main question is do the exchanges have the assets backed 1-to-1, or do they not? Because if they do, then they should be fine, right? If they don't, then this higher interest rate environment is likely going to expose them for who they are. So it's just a matter of, did they do things by the book, or did they not? Is sort of the question.
Yeah, and even Grayscale Trust, they're we're not going to give you that that data, the on-chain data, because of privacy and because of protection.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I'm like, well, okay.
Like, do they know who they're
But, you know,
talking to? Like, like how's that going to change anything if they tell us that? But I do want to move on to the next question, because there's the contagion risk, of course, and it kind of seems like most of that is behind us. Maybe there's a couple more things to fall, but the cryptoverse perhaps will just shrug it off. The thing that I really would like to talk about is another risk, and it's beyond a cryptoverse risk in and of itself, and it's sort of the recession type risk and the demand side of things, right? So with Bitcoin, there's two schools of thought that I see, and I'm sure you guys have seen it as well. One is more of a supply side based thing, where you have the Bitcoin halving, and approximately every 4 years. And note that this halving in 2024 is going to occur earlier, because if you think back, the first halving was like the very end of the year in 2012. In 2016, it was like in July or something, and in 2020 it was in May. This one's going to be even earlier. So do you think that Bitcoin's price is more dependent on the supply side of things, so like the halving, or do you think it's more so dependent on the demand side of things, which would involve things like loose monetary conditions, and just that a measure of, say, excess liquidity? And I don't really think that, you can understand why both sides think the way they do, right? Like you can certainly understand why there's an argument to be made there. So I'm curious what you guys think. Is it more of a supply side thing? Is it more of a demand side thing? Are you somewhere in between? Rob, we'll start with you on this one.
I'll make this quick. I think it has to be both. We saw that in March 2020, when the coronavirus came out, they started to do money printing because the unemployment rate was so high and people couldn't get out. And then that carried over to 2021, when we had an excess slush of money that was coming out because of stimmy checks. And of course, that's when we hit an all-time high. But it was like perfect timing, because we just had a Bitcoin halving in 2020. And usually after that year, then we have an all-time high. And it was just like everything just kind of fell into place. So I can see how it is. Now we can see that there is quantitative tightening, and they're taking some funds back. So you see that we're also in that time frame of when we go from an all-time high to, of course, the big dip, 2021 to 2022. This is what I call the reset year. And then, of course, the Bitcoin halving will be end of March, early April of 2024. So I think it's uncanny how it's kind of falling into place in these cycles. So I say it's just kind of both.
And it's almost funny, because it's like, it sort of seems like it's almost aligning perfectly again, like where we're probably by 2024. The Fed's not, the Fed likes to be hawkish last year and this year. They're not going to be hawkish forever, right? So at some point we'll turn things back around. So Guy, what do you think? Are you in the same camp? Are you more subscribed to one side or the other?
I kind of tend to feel that I lean towards the kind of loose monetary condition aspect of it, really, because I think so much of what drives not just inflows into crypto, but also excitement in crypto, buzz around crypto is unfortunately speculation. I think the majority of people don't come for the tech. I think they come for the excitement. They come for the chance to make some money. And they, that liquidity, that excess money finds its way into the system. And as you say, it looks like it's going to align quite nicely with the halving. I don't think the halving would necessarily generate that much excitement among people if there wasn't that money to put into it, if we didn't have the right kind of conditions, if the taps weren't sort of turned on. What I find though is that it then seems to sort of kind of loop back on itself, in that you get this money flooding in, and people come in and they buy into BTC, and they also buy into altcoins, and they buy into meme coins and things like that. But the crucial thing is they get involved, they enter the market. And then I think there's that statistic you alluded to earlier on, Rob, that the percentage of people who come into crypto and then become hodlers is really high. It's well above, did you say sort of 60 to 70%?
Yeah, it's like, for 1 year plus, not like 5 or 10 years or something crazy like that. But yeah, 1 year, 12 months or more, if they just hold on to it. They're like, well, I don't really care, because what's the alternative?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm in. I'm here now, so I'm gonna ride it out. If I'm underwater, I'm gonna ride it out until prices get better. I think for the longer term, I think it's around the longer term timeframes. It's sort of around 50%. I think become hodlers, and then as they're in the market and it's that saying, isn't it? To truly understand something, you have to be involved. You have to be in the market, and then they start to appreciate the tech of it. Then they start to see the investment case for BTC and ETH. And I think that money, as we've seen with Bitcoin dominance, that money tends to kind of flow out of meme coins. Their perception of the whole space matures, and they think, yeah, actually, these are some good long-term assets to hold. And then, the money finds its way into these more kind of blue chip projects. But I think it needs that loose monetary policy. I think it needs that to kind of get the whole thing going, to light the touch paper.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm kind of like, I've often struggled with this because I've talked to a lot of people, and it seems like a lot of the people in crypto, not all of them, but a lot of them, and I mean, obviously, Guy is said he's more on the excess liquidity side, the loose monetary condition side. But a lot of people in crypto are more so around it's only based on the halving. And then the people that I talk to outside of crypto, so people who are more, say, like in traditional finance, but have exposure to crypto, they're more on the side of it's more like, it needs loose monetary conditions. And so far, Bitcoin has only ever really known loose monetary conditions. And so I suppose we're going to find out. And I'm kind of somewhere in between. I think that the halving is a great way to generate hype. It's a great way to bring people back. I mean, look at Litecoin this year. And we talked about Litecoin. We talked about Litecoin a few weeks ago, and it's sort of like a trial year for Bitcoin in the sense that you see that relative outperformance of Litecoin leading into its halving in the summer of 23. So I think it's like August of 23. August 2023. Do note if you're in the audience and you hear me say Litecoin, note that the relative strength normally stops about 1 month before it's halving. So just keep that in mind. So we know that there's some hype can be generated from the halving, but I think in order to see new all-time highs, you also need to see loose monetary conditions, right? So you could see pumps and stuff, but in order to go to new all-time highs, you also want to see some loose monetary conditions. Is sort of where I'm. So I'm kind of in between. It's probably a mix of both. You need elements of both. And so far they've always aligned perfectly. So far they've aligned fairly well. So I guess we'll find out what's going to happen in 2024. The next question is, this is going back to the Federal Reserve because if we think back to 2021. It was inflation is transitory, right? And if you listen to the Fed then you probably wouldn't have been as hedged as much as you should have, because maybe if you thought that inflation was transitory, then you would have had no reason to suspect that they were going to have to raise interest rates and tighten as much as they have. But if you had listened to them last year in 2022, you would have done quite well, right? You said, all right, well, I'm not going to fight the Fed. If they're going to raise interest rates, up to 5% or something, or 4% within a year, then what's the point? And what we've seen is the market is constantly trying to figure out what is the Fed going to do. Right now, the market is saying something completely different than the Fed. So the market, if you look at what they're predicting, they're suggesting that the Fed will be cutting interest rates later this year. But the Fed has said, no, we're not actually going to cut interest rates this year. You guys don't know what you're talking about. So my question really is who is right? Because if the market is right, if the Fed's going to cut rates, that would imply that they're going to break something. But the Fed, I think, is sort of the opinion that the economy is much stronger than people think it is. So what do you guys think? Guy, do you think that the market is getting this right? Do you think the Fed is getting it right? Or do you think it's somewhere in between?
I think the Fed is getting this one right. I really do. I think that markets have been kind of conditioned by easy, by these easy monetary policies that we were talking about just a moment ago. I think markets have been conditioned by them to buy the dip over the next few years, but over the last few years, I should say. But I think the Fed has, as you say, the Fed has been so categorical about what it plans to do, and I think the real issue, or the real thing that the Fed is really kind of worrying about, is this idea that inflation will go down, will go down to an acceptable level under pressure of higher interest rates, and then it would pivot, the Fed would pivot, rates would go down, and inflation would come back up. And at that point, I think that is when the real danger is, because I think that's when inflation expectations in the wider economy just run wild, coupled with the fact that the Fed would then kind of lose all credibility. You know, it would be then seen, they'd be seen as the guys who let inflation, you know, who thought they'd crushed inflation, but then let it spring right back up again. So I really think the Fed is going to do what Jerome has been just at pains to point out at every recent meeting. I think the Fed is going to see this through until it is 100% confident as it can be, that inflation has really been stamped down. So I think this idea of people expecting a pivot is, yeah, I can see where that optimism comes from, perhaps, but I don't see the Fed following through with it as well. And I think in terms of something breaking, you know, in terms of a recession or something like that, one thing that I'm kind of keeping my eye on for the next year or so is kind of noises from the White House. Obviously, you guys have a presidential election there. It's next year, isn't it? 2024 is the election.
2020? Yeah, I guess so. Look at that.
Yeah. So I kind of wonder how much political pressure is going to be coming from the White House to keep a lid on inflation more than anything else. Because I think recessions, if you think about a recession, okay, it hurts, it brings a lot of pain, but certain people, not everyone in the economy feels the effects of a recession. There are always going to be people whose jobs are secure, who had enough in the way of savings. Let's face it, there are always some people who do well out of a recession. But inflation affects everyone right across the board, every single voter. So again, I think when you factor that in, when you factor the fact that there's an election next year and inflation is this all-pervading force that really means pain for everyone, I think we have to don't fight the Fed. I think we have to listen to them. We have to assume that they're going to stay the course.
Yeah, I mean they have so far. That's what they've been doing what they said they're going to do. Rob, are you in agreement? Do you think I mean, it seemed last year everything was a bit more clear cut, right? Like they had to raise a lot because they were so far behind the curve. What about now? I mean, you know, as we get further and further out, it's going to make people question, you know, how strong is their resolve, right? Do you think they'll stick to it, or do you think they'll pivot?
I think if there was no late 70s, early 80s bounce back from the interest rates or the inflation going up or rebounding after what Burns did, that I think that they might say, you know what, let's pause a little bit because we got it under control, or let's just, you know, reverse course. But I think because they can look back at the past and figure out what happened, like, well, we don't want that to happen because I don't want to be the guy who's going to be let go. You know, Jerome Powell's saying, I don't want to be the guy, and be recognized as Burns. I want to be recognized as Volcker, and I want to stay the course. But there's a couple things. First, it surprises me how many people were like, they will not cut rates. I remember Max Kaiser came on, and he was on a couple of shows. He's like, they will never cut rates because they just talk a good game. They never do it. I know they're chicken. And they did it again. And then they did it again. And they did it again. And he kept coming on going, you know what, they're going to stop.
You mean they'll never raise rates?
No, never raise rates, excuse me. They'll never raise the rates because they just won't do it. And it just kept happening again and again. And I think it's like the market's trying to be smarter than wisdom of the crowd and just go, you know what, this is the time it's going to happen. And it never really happens. I will just, if you want to make it super simple, this is like, I just take a look at it and go, okay, well, the meeting's going to come out. Jerome's going to come out and tell us if he's going to cut or not. If that's the day I'm supposed to dollar cost average, hint, I dollar cost average every day, I can just wait and just see what he says and just say, okay, if he says, you know, we're going to pause today. Well, I know the market's going to skyrocket. Maybe I want to just wait a little bit. Or if he comes out and goes, you know what, like in February, we're gonna cut the rates 25 basis points. Or maybe he comes out and says 50. Well, guess what? I would buy right as he's talking, and then put those orders in, and then just watch everything. Or no, excuse me, just wait a little bit, and then just watch everything collapse, and then buy a little bit later. I mean, that's how, if you really wanted to get behind it, that's how you could do it. But I don't see, I mean, smarter people than me are saying that he's going to stop and he's going to pivot. But he's and the whole team has been like, no, we're going to keep doing this. So, do whatever you want to, but this is what we're going to do.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens. I mean, I guess we'll get another rate hike, next week? And then we'll see what happens in March and May. And I'm guessing they'll at least stop hiking at some point in the, earlier, in the first few meetings at some point, and then keep them elevated for a while and see what happens. But should be an interesting year.
A pause, I think, is definitely within the realms of possibility. I mean, sooner rather than later. I mean, right. By the way, have you seen the consensus for the rate hike on the 1st of February?
I mean,
when the next FOMC meeting? It's like 99.8%.
Yeah, 25 basis points, right?
Yeah, for 25. Yeah, which is I should clarify that. Yeah, it's extraordinary, isn't it? And I guess the only other thing I want to say regarding that is obviously people are pointing to the labor market in the US and saying, well, what about all these tech layoffs and things like that? Is the labor market starting to break? And I mean, I looked this up, and tech accounts for roughly 7.7% of the US economy, of the labor force. So even if you were to lay off the entire tech sector, that would still not be a significant enough number of people. So, I think one thing that someone pointed out was perhaps this issue of the debt ceiling may be the only, maybe the black swan that perhaps forces the Fed to pivot, but. Other than that, I think they'll stay the course.
Yeah, we'll see. Because I know that all the Democrats want to just say, you know what, lift that limit. We're going to keep going and just spending. But of course, that's the beauty of having a split Congress. So you got the House of Representatives and the Senate, and it's not going to go through one, so it probably won't pass. So that's what might happen. We might just shut down the government again, and we'll see how that works out because they might gridlock. Now that would be interesting times.
Yeah, I think markets a lot of times like split Congress, it's like the split Congress because it means like just nothing's going to get passed through, and markets like more certainty. If one side holds everything, then they can pass legislation through very easily, and there's a lot of changes that can occur in the market, or a lot of changes that could affect the market. But it's kind of you get into this gridlock phase where nothing really happens. But yeah, I mean, we'll see what the Fed does. Should be an interesting year. The last question, and then we're going to try to take some questions from the audience. So maybe let's try to keep this one a little bit shorter. Rob, what are your thoughts here on how do you stay interested in crypto during this type of phase? I mean, look, we all know Bitcoin's up, 40-50% from its low, and it's great and all, right? But it's still the same price that it was, 6 months ago, before we really collapsed down, and especially with what happened with FTX. So. How do you stay interested in crypto, and what it will bring the interest back, to sort of the masses? Is it utility? Is it halving? Is it something else? What do you think?
I'll make this quick. So what keeps me into it is just to do the videos, just to keep people engaged, because I know that apathy is what's going to turn people off and go, you know what, it hasn't really moved too much. I mean, thank God for this little mini rally, right? So there's that first part, and then to see what'll turn around. This is what will turn around to the next bull run. Price. That's it. So price goes up, numbers go up, everybody's happy, and that's pretty much it. You can talk utility all you want to, but it really just comes down to numbers go up, and that's it.
I like your perspective, the honest perspective, right? Guy, what do you think? And by the way, as Guy is responding, if you have any questions, feel free to go ahead and start asking them in the chat.
How do I keep interested? I like to think how far we've come as an industry. It's what do we have? Bitcoin's 14th birthday a few weeks ago. So we're coming up to a decade and a half, which really is nothing in the grand scheme of things. And I like to think back. I'm a big one for reading books about crypto. I love reading about Bitcoin's history, the early days, all that sort of stuff. And I just think how far this industry has come in such a short space of time. And I was putting together some research for we were looking at a developers report, the Electric Capital developers report for last year. And they pointed out something fascinating, that it took, for the first 7 years, it took it took those 7 years to add 1,000 developers to Bitcoin and to crypto in general. So it took 7 years to get to 1,000 crypto devs. And in the second 7 years, in the 7 years since, it's tens of thousands. And I think that for me is a beautiful statistic, and it shows how far we've come. So that's how I counteract the sense of apathy and keep interested. In terms of, I'm just for the sake of it, I'm going to take a contrary view to Rob and say I think utility will play a big part this time, and I think we're going to see a killer app of some sort, and I think it could very well be from something like GameFi or the metaverse, and something perhaps even that gets kids interested, younger kids, younger people especially, and I think that could be a huge catalyst. Finally, we get a really great blockchain game. We get we get increased metaverse adoption, and that drives it forward. So I'm going to say increased utility.
I honestly hope you're right.
I do too.
And I even have the shirt, right? Dubious speculation. It would be nice if it weren't so dubious, and we actually could see a bit more of the real world utility behind some of this stuff. More so we can find utility ourselves, of course, but to be captured by the masses, it has to become a bit more friendly, I think, than it is right now.
Yeah,
and by a bit more friendly, it's probably an understatement, right? It's scary for a lot of people to want to get into crypto especially if you had some friends that were in FTX, or if you had some friends that were in Celsius or BlockFi or Luna or UST. It's like, what do you do? Like, how do you trust it if it just seems like there's nowhere to hide? Let me get to some of the questions. We have about 8 more minutes or so. So let me scroll up here.
Man, Guy, I gotta tell you, I hope you're right about the utility. Because if we had just, even Mark Cuban said it. He goes, what's gonna be rocket fuel for the market? It's one super app, one big utility. If crypto gets one big utility, it will go to the moon. And I was like, that's coming from Mark Cuban. He's a pretty reasonably smart guy. And I was like, I just don't know what that is yet, and if it's really even close. DeFi is promising, GameFi is promising, but that thing even like in China, WeChat, some kind of app where you can do everything within it, it'd be perfect. But who's going to create that? I'm just waiting.
Well, I think he makes a good point. If you look at the .com crash, what brought the .com crash, or what brought the internet back? It was actually creating stuff that we all use every single day, right? We all use the internet now. And I think that's a huge. Imagine if that hadn't come out of that and everything just sort of development slowly died and no one cared about it anymore. The prices would not have rebounded, right? But it was the real world utility that drove the price appreciation. So, and I think, Guy, to go off what you said, I think that higher interest rate environments sort of force utility to be found, because it's just harder for people to speculate when cash isn't cheap anymore. You have to look more towards the utility. Let me get to some questions. So someone asked when I'm going to get a haircut. Of course, I normally wait until the density of haircut questions gets to a certain point, and that's when I go get one. It's kind of getting that to that point right now. So I probably
when all the questions are about haircut, that's when it's time.
Yeah, and then when I get a haircut, all the comments on that video are only about it, because I normally just get it buzzed off.
The buzz cut. You look like in the military. It looks good.
Yeah, I don't like getting it because I just get it buzzed whenever I need to. All right, so let me find some questions here. I think I saw a few good ones. So here's one. Someone says, if Ethereum is deemed as a security, right? Which, this is a big if. We don't know. I kind of hope it's not, honestly. I sort of hope that Ethereum's not a security. But the question is if Ethereum is security, what would that mean for layer 2s? What do you guys think?
Oh, man. So... first you gotta think of it like this. I buy Ethereum for 2 reasons. One is because number might go up, and this, of course, everything's built on it. But the second reason is I need to pay for gas, and that is a real utility thing. So I don't know how they're going to do that. But if you say Ethereum is a security, then everything that will be built upon it, because what would make it more decentralized? Because that's what I think, as Gary's looking at, is how decentralized are you? That's why Avalanche and Polkadot and Cosmos, they're all rushing to decentralize it as fast as possible. With the layer 2 solutions, you really depend on Ethereum. And I think we go from there. So with that warped logic that they have, I think it would be pretty tough for layer twos, unless I'm seeing it a wrong way. That's what I got.
Fair enough.
Guy, what do you think?
I'm with you, Rob. Yeah, I kind of feel I feel the same way. Really, it's such a tricky one to try and game out in your head. But I mean, look, you remember on the day of the merge, Gary Gensler came out and he said that he considers ETH to be a security, doesn't he?
Hit that guy.
Which really spoke volumes to me. That was a punchy move. What does it mean for layer twos? I just don't know. I think that close association with Ethereum, I think that could, I think it would be dicey for them as well.
Yeah, that's why Polkadot is trying so hard to get that letter of no contest to where they can say we're not a security. If they can get that, I mean, imagine what the price would do for Polkadot. But I mean, even if if they're all securities, I got to tell you, I know people think it's awful, and we've talked about this before. I think it could be good because like all these crap projects that are out there that are just kind of siphoning away liquidity, they just go away and they're useless anyhow because they're just Me Too projects. The big projects will last. The developers will go there. They'll pay their fines, then move on. And then that really only affects the centralized exchanges to list them as securities. I think it's not a death sentence. That's all.
Mm. Of course, it does leave the question. I mean, I don't know anything much about the process. So, how hard, how easy is it to register as a security? I know Stacks did it. That project building on Bitcoin.
Smart contracts.
They actually registered as a security, and then the difficult thing for them was deregistering as a security. But I don't know how easy it is to actually do that. I mean, I guess it's probably a relatively expensive process, but if it's easily enough done, then you could be absolutely right, Rob. It could very well be a good thing.
Yeah, who knows? I don't know.
Let's get to a couple more. Someone asked, I think someone asked this last time too, guys. So I'll just give you a brief time to tell people how to do it. They want to know how do they sign up for your, because you have a conference, right, coming up in June, is that right?
Yeah, June.
So they want to know how they
June
get tickets.
10th.
Is that through your website?
Yes, I will double check with Macy. They can follow Coin Bureau Live on Twitter, and there's sort of updates about it there. But I know Macy's working on the ticketing thing at the moment. So yeah, we'll be posting updates about it. I'll be tweeting about it as well on Coin Bureau's Twitter. But Coin Bureau Live on Twitter is probably the best place to sort of keep in the loop.
All right, good to know. Someone asked, what moves are you guys making in crypto today? Does anyone want to take that? I mean, I think Rob is doing the micro DCA, right? I mean, that's what you've always done, isn't it?
Yeah, that's what I've always done. But I mean, like, I've been taking profits along the way. Like when it was up 30%, I took some profits. Then we jumped up a little bit, and I showed how I did it. But I mean, in the long run, you can do. That's not financial advice. In the long run, I think the market will do pretty well. So it just depends on your time frame. And me, I'll be around for a while. Guy, what are you doing these days?
Not an awful lot, to be honest. I'm waiting it out on the sidelines. I probably should start DCAing. It didn't quite feel like the right time, but yeah, I'm happy with my allocation, and yeah, I'm just watching it all unfold in front of me.
Come on, guys, fun. Just DCA and then go against everybody. It's fun. Go against Ben and just say, I don't care. I'm gonna DCA into alts and I'm gonna watch my.
Yeah, it's funny. Every time we get an altcoin pump, everyone asks me, "Have you bought alts yet?" You know. I know.
What are you doing, Ben?
I basically I think Bitcoin is still the play. Like I mean, so with regards to crypto, I just think that Bitcoin. Because I think of things on like a risk-adjusted return basis, and where is the primary risk? And Guy was talking about this earlier too, with regards to the risk on the altcoin market. I'm still of the opinion that Bitcoin is the better play right now. Like it's a better play, I think, than Ethereum, even, and in the entire altcoin market. That doesn't mean that some altcoins won't outperform it, but again, I point towards look at their Bitcoin pairs. They're all in massive downtrends. All of them, or maybe not all of them, right? I mean, you can always cherry pick a few altcoins that are not, but and even even the ones that got their largest bounces recently, like Solana, like look at the Solana Bitcoin pair. It rallied right back up to that 20-week SMA where now it's struggling to get back through, just like it did in June and just like it did back in like March and April of 2022. So my opinion is relatively remains unchanged. I think that Bitcoin, in terms of crypto allocation, I think Bitcoin is primarily where you want to be. My altcoin positions are relatively small, and I mean, look, over the last since June, if you've been in the altcoin market, you've had plenty of opportunities to make money, right? But my stance is that Bitcoin, you can always buy altcoins later with Bitcoin, and I think that the altcoin market is still going to lose value against Bitcoin. Again, if you look at last cycle, most altcoins still bled even when the bottom was in. So if you take the stance that the bottom is in, or if it's not in, typically even when it is in, the altcoin market still bleeds against Bitcoin for another half year at least. And we're seeing that happen. We're seeing that happen right now. The altcoin market is bleeding. So like I'm mostly Bitcoin, and I think having a good cash position this year is going to serve us quite well too, because normally, as Rob was saying, normally you have your primary bear market years 2014, 2018, 2022, and then the following years tend to just chop up both sides, right? So the bears get wrecked, the bulls get wrecked for a year, right? So it's 2022, the bears get wrecked, or the bulls get wrecked. 2023, I think you're going to see both sides get wrecked. Right now, the bears get wrecked. Eventually, I think this year you'll see the bulls get wrecked as well. And then by the time we get out to 2024, 2025, everyone's been sufficiently wrecked that we can finally go back up again.
Sufficiently wrecked. That's a good T-shirt.
That's sufficiently wrecked, right? Well, think about it. I mean, like, think about what happened.
Should we rebrand the show to sufficiently wrecked?
Sufficiently wrecked. That's perfect.
Well, think about what happened in 2015 and 2019. You had, in 2015, it was the bulls got wrecked first in the first half of the year, and then the last half of the year, the bears got wrecked. And then in 2019, it was the opposite, right? The bears got wrecked for the first half of the year, and then the bulls got wrecked for the second half. So I think we're likely just going to see something very similar again, where both sides get destroyed sufficiently enough so that there's no one left to panic sell on the next dip or something,
Yeah, this is why, like, I'm always talking about, like, just take a little bit of profits along the way. That way you don't feel so bad, as things go down. Because I look at some of these plays like Aptos. I mean, what is that up today? Like 50%, 60% in one day or something like that? Like, I look at that, I'm like, why couldn't I get into that? Oh, that's right, because I just don't do those super risky plays, and that's it. But I mean, I can take a little bit of risk, buy a little bit of things, and then take a little bit of profit, and then wait for 2025, 26. I'm okay.
If I had actually bought altcoins, then maybe I would take profit, but I haven't actually bought any, so it's kind of hard to take profit on something you haven't actually bought.
Dude, the day that you buy altcoins, I'll be like, okay, that's it. This is the time to go heavy.
Yeah, we'll see.
Back up the truck.
Yeah, we'll see. Maybe I'll just get left behind. Maybe I'll just be the one that gets left behind, right? And everyone can. Yeah. But again, I think that I think Bitcoin is where people should be right now in terms of crypto exposure. It's the blue chip, and I think it will hold strong.
So if Ben starts buying altcoins, it's either the time to buy or you're already too late.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. Which is why I think Bitcoin is a great hedge, because Bitcoin's going to lead us out of the bear market anyways. If it's already occurring, or if it occurs in 6 months, Bitcoin will likely lead it. So I think Bitcoin exposure is, and look at Ethereum's valuation against Bitcoin. It's been going down recently quite quickly. It's already, it dropped from what, like 0.075 to 0.068 or 0.0685 relatively recently. It's bounced back up now, but I think it'll rise again strong, but I think it'll have to wait until next year is my guess. Maybe one last question, and sure. then we'll wrap it up. Yeah, people are talking about some of the altcoins that are up.
People love altcoins.
Okay, here's a question. This might create some contentious views. Do you think ADA is a blue chip?
I'll let Guy take that one first.
Oh. I'll take it first.
Okay.
Go on, Ben.
No, I don't think it is. I think
what?
that I know.
I'm off the show.
Let me explain. So I think that Bitcoin and Ethereum are blue chips. And I think that ADA still has something left to prove, okay? Let me say a few positive things about it, first of all, okay? So the positive thing is ADA put in a new high last cycle. That's not something a lot of altcoins can say. So 99% of altcoins, I would say, put in a new high one cycle, and then the next cycle, it's done. Like they're done. Like it's sort of like an echo where it sort of goes up a little bit, but it doesn't put in a new high. So I would say that from that perspective, ADA has made at least an impression that, hey, it's actually around, it's actually here to stay. Furthermore, it has not been a part of some of these contagion events as a lot of the other altcoins have been in. I mean,
True.
It hasn't. And, I mean, I understand there's a lot of people that say things like, well, their development is very, very slow. Look, sometimes you need things to be slow, because when things go fast, look what happened to Luna, right? I mean, look what happened there. Look what happened to Solana. I mean, I know Solana's up recently, but again, so far, it's just another lower high. And it was down 97%. I mean, this bounce that it's in basically just gets it down to being, only 92% down or something from the all-time high. So
True.
I will say that I don't think it's a blue chip right now. I'm not saying it can't become one. If it can put in a new high like one more time, then I think you start to make the case that it's here to stay. But I still think it's a little bit too early. And the other reason I would say that it's hard to call it a blue chip is when you have Bitcoin that only went down 77% so far, at least, and it remains to be seen if that's it or not. And you have Ethereum that went down 80 something percent. I mean, ADA was down like 92%, and going down 92% when Bitcoin only went down 77, that's a big jump, right? That's a big change. And the ADA valuation against Bitcoin has been dropping like a rock since like September of 2021. Look at the Ethereum valuation against Bitcoin. It's been going as much as I've wanted it to go down over the last year, it's just gone sideways, right? I mean, it's gone up and down, but it's mostly just gone sideways. So I would still say that Bitcoin and Ethereum are the blue chips. I don't really think Cardano is a blue chip, even though I like it as a project. If it can maybe put in one more all-time high, then I think you really make the case that it's here to stay and it's not really going anywhere. But it's already, look, the fact that it put in a new all-time high in 2021 is at least something that most altcoins didn't really do. Look at XRP, look at Litecoin. They basically just went to their prior to highs or a lower high. Look at EOS, Monero. A lot of these got nowhere, did not put in new all-time highs. Cardano did. So, I mean, that's at least something. And we can just move on from there. I mean, unless you guys have anything to add.
Guy, what do you got?
I'm with Ben on this one. I think it's a blue chip in waiting. I think there's a lot of development work to do. There's a lot of battle testing to do. But hey, I mean, Cardano isn't in a rush. That's Cardano's whole thing. Yeah. So it doesn't matter that it's not a blue chip yet. I think if it proves itself, and I think there's every reason why it can, then it can become a blue chip. But yeah, and also, I mean, how do you define necessarily a blue chip? I mean, people still refer to Solana as a blue chip. Right. After, even after everything that's happened over the last few weeks. So, I mean, how do you define it? But yeah, ADA's one in waiting. Yeah, on the fence.
And to play devil's advocate against myself, I would have called Ethereum a blue chip a few years ago, and it still dropped 94% in its last bear market. I mean, from the all-time high of like $1,400 back in 2018 to its low at like $80, that was like a 94% drop. And it still recovered eventually to new all-time highs.
Well, I mean, look at the price action. Like the last one, 2018, it went from over $1 to like 2 or 3 cents. And of course, it bounced all the way back to $3. So now it went down to 92% again, or somewhere around there. And I think it'll bounce back up. But the real question is utility, right? What are they building? What's going on? Because if you can't have that, what are you doing?
Right.
So I had an interview with Mickey Watkins from World Mobile. They're actually doing things as far as telecommunications. And we talked to people from Meld, Wing Riders, and the different DeFi projects. And then they have a stablecoin come out with JED. It's an over-collateralized stablecoin. I mean, I think these are good things. But I mean, people always point up to TVL, total volume locked up. And they'll say, well, I mean, look at Ethereum and look at everything else. And Cardano's way down here. Look, I used to complain too that they were slow, but I'm glad they're slow because you don't have like an Iron Finance and all the other rug pulls that are out there. So we'll see.
And a lot of those statistics can be manipulated as well.
True.
And I mean, I heard all sorts of statistics like that as to why other altcoins were better. and some of those altcoins dropped 97, 98% already, you know? And like, so that stuff doesn't always mean what people hope that it means, because it can be manipulated, and I think it is often manipulated to sort of tell a certain story. But yeah, I mean, I'm optimistic about it, and ADA is one of those ones that I bought back in back in 2018, 2019, 2020 at 2 cents, and back then people said it was never going to go back to new all-time highs, and then it did. Eventually it did. So hopefully we'll see that occur. But we gotta get going here. We're running late. It's already 10:10, or at least where I am. So thank you guys for tuning in, guys. If you're not subscribed to Rob and Guy, make sure you go subscribe to them. Links are in the description below. Furthermore, next week's live stream will occur on Rob's channel. So from what I've seen throughout like all of the live streams like that we've ever done, like everyone loves it when it's on Rob's channel. Like they say he's like the best moderator and everything.
That may be true, but Guy gave me a run for the money last time. He was really moving things, and he had new technology, and he still didn't flub up too hard. I was like, that's impressive, because when you start using StreamYard, you're like, what the heck is this?
Yeah,
I think we all
great.
do just a fine job.
Yeah, I'm just telling you, over the last like year, I've looked at the comments and everyone says that Rob is like he's like really great at moderating. I mean, we've only recently started doing it with Guy as well, and yeah, I think it went really well last week. But on Rob's channel next week, make sure you tune in, go subscribe to his channel down in the description below, and also subscribe to Guy. It'll be on his channel the following week after that. And I want to thank everyone for tuning in, and we'll see you guys next time.